So we have a topic here called eSight overview. So we're going to learn about eSight. eSight is the software Huawei owned and created software that you can use to manage your network. So it's an NMS, a network management system. So we just want to understand how it works. So with the rapid development of network technology, number of network devices on an enterprise network increases exponentially with the growing network types, making enterprise network management complex, very complex. So to meet the challenges, Huawei launched a new generation O&M, operation and maintenance system called eSight, for enterprise networks to implement unified management of various types of network devices from different vendors, and quick deployment and maintenance of networks and services, thereby greatly improving network management efficiency. So what are the advantages of eSight compared with the other network management software? Also, what are the installation and deployment modes of eSight? So those are some of the things that we're going to look at. But as we've seen, one of the greatest advantages of eSight is that it can also monitor and manage devices from other vendors, because it actually uses SNMP. It uses SNMP, which is a standard protocol. Okay, a volunteer. Val? Okay, just go ahead.
Upon completion of this section, you will be able to, 1, understand the background about eSight, 2, master eSight installation and uninstallation procedures, 3, master the eSight license application process.
Exactly, good. So let's look into eSight. So as we read on the forward, when the company grows, the network also grows, and managing it becomes more and more complex. So that means that as the number of devices increases exponentially, the network maintenance resources also need to increase. That includes manpower, and these can be costly. This raises the maintenance cost. So that is why enterprises need a management platform that can make maintenance easy on a large-scale network. So when you have the system, then you can have fewer manpower, because a single person can now monitor a large area. Okay, so enterprise network management requirements. So you want a unified management of multi-vendor devices. So within your network, most of the time within your network, you're going to have devices from different vendors. Maybe you have a firewall from Cisco, you have a Huawei switch, you have a Juniper a router, for example, or a layer 3 switch, and so on and so forth. So with enterprise network management, you want to go for a network management system that offers multi-vendor support. So it's called a network management system, an NMS. So some of the NMSs, so as you can see here, vendors needs to be installed to manage these devices, because NMS vendors can only manage their own devices. So that has been one of the major problems, that Cisco, because they want to control their markets, they create an NMS that can only manage their devices, for example. So besides, the operation interfaces and fields of the NMSs are different. So to realize efficient management of devices over the entire network, a standard universal network management protocol is required. So let's see. So Huawei eSight. Huawei eSight is used for enterprise operation and maintenance. So it's the next generation operation and maintenance system developed for campus networks and branch networks of enterprises. It implements unified management of enterprise resources, services, and also users. So some of the characteristics of eSight, it's a lightweight system, wizard-based installation. So we're going to go through the installation. So it's quite easy, client-free, vendor neutral. It can manage networks anytime, anywhere through a browser. So you can access your network from anywhere in the world. So it also has customization features, and it supports multi-vendor devices using the standard network management protocol, SNMP. So all vendor devices support SNMP. So that's how eSight is able to manage other vendors' devices, because this is a standard, widely accepted, widely used. Now, we have 3 versions of eSight, and they have certain characteristics. The very basic one is known as the compact edition. It can support a maximum of 60 nodes, so can only be used on small scale networks. Then the other one is the standard edition. This is the most used edition of eSight. Can support up to 5,000 nodes. Then the last one is the professional edition, which can support up to 20,000 nodes. 20,000 nodes. So this one, the main advantage of the professional edition over the standard edition is that it can support hierarchical management of large sized networks. So those are the 3 editions of eSight: compact, standard, and professional. Please remember the maximum number of devices that they can support. Okay, so now to SNMP. Standard Network Management Protocol is an application layer protocol that defines the transmission of management information between the network management system and the agent. So we learned about SNMP at the associate level. So as we know, as a network admin, you'll have your network management system. Then your system is going to be sending SNMP messages to your network resources. So this network resource can be a router, can be a switch, can be a firewall, can be a server, etc. Now, if your network runs SNMP, if you've enabled SNMP, then it runs an SNMP application called an agent. Now, the agent is used to send messages and also to retrieve messages from what we call a MIB, or Management Information Base. So the Management Information Base is usually structured in a tree-like structure, like that. So for example, you have to go to System View in order to go to the Interface View. Then in the interface, maybe you can go to a Protocol View. Then in that Protocol View, you can go to another part, like that. So that is how it is actually organized there. So that's called the MIB. So you can send parameters. You can also retrieve parameters from the MIB, and thereby you can be able to configure your devices over the network and monitor certain other parameters. Now, SNMP has evolved over several versions. So we have SNMP version 1, we have SNMP version 2C, which is the one that is commonly used. Sorry, version 2C, and the last version is SNMP, the latest version, version 3. So while SNMP version 1 is easy to implement, the problem with it is security. Security does not have a way of authenticating that indeed the NMS is a legit NMS. Then we have version 2C. This one is majorly used, and it provides some moderate security. Then this is the latest. It uses what we call a user security model to provide a secure access control mechanism. So this one is the most secure version, version 3. Yeah? Okay. So these are the SNMP messages. Particularly here, we are looking at SNMP version 1 messages. So as we said, the MIB is simply a database that has parameters that are organized in a certain tree-like structure. Now, the NMS will be sending certain messages in order to retrieve or change those parameters in the MIB. So one of the messages is what we call the GET request. So the GET request is used to retrieve one or more parameter values from the MIB of the agent process. Then the next SNMP message is what we call the response. So this is what will now get you back whatever you wanted. So this will give you the results. Then we have get next request. Get next request. So you remember we said that the MIB is organized in a tree-like structure. So get next request is used to go deeper into the tree in that particular order, for example, to go deeper. So get next request. Then we have the response. We already talked about the response. Then we have the set request. So when you want to change certain parameters in the MIB, you use the set request. And then, of course, you'll get a response after you do that. Then the last message type is the trap message. So the trap message is used for notification of critical or major events on the device. Notification. So you can set, for example, in your router that, for example, if the CPU gets to 95%, 95% of usage, then you want to get a notification. So you can send a trap. So that is what trap are used for. Okay. So this is the roadmap for configuring SNMP on a router. So the first thing you have to do is to configure the communication between the device and the network management system. That means that your network management system should be able to ping your managed device, your router, your switch, your server, whatever. Then after that, you need to enable SNMP on your router or switch. This is enabled by default. Then you need to configure the version of SNMP that you want to use. I've already shown you the 3 versions that you can pick from. Then after that, you need to enable what we call the read-write community names, so that SNMP can be able to send and change parameters on the MIB. So you need to enable the read-write community names. So these processes are mandatory, so you have to do them. On the other hand, well, these processes we're having here are optional. So for example, you can configure parameters for sending trap packets. So as we've said, for example, you can set that if on a certain port there's congestion, you want to get a notification, so it will send a trap. You can also configure the target host that receives an alarm and error codes. You can also configure the contact and location of the device administrator. Okay. So let's look at an example of how that can be done. So you can you need to configure the IP addresses so that your NMS can be able to ping your managed device. Then on your device, you can enable the SNMP process by using that command, but it is enabled by default. Then you can use this command to select the version that you want to use, and you can enable the read-write, the read and write for the MIB, like that. You can also configure the trap, the target, what error, who is going to be sent the error message. You can also enable the trap, and through which interface should I send the trap. So those are some of the things that you can configure. So let's look at the installation process for eNSP. Now, if you want to install eNSP, you can do so in a Windows server or a SUSE Linux server. eNSP also supports what we call a silent installation. That is when you're using a guided window, so that you're not configuring everything from scratch. eNSP supports English and Chinese. On performance, the installation, you can install from either a CD, and the CD does not exceed 850 MBs, and the installation can actually be completed in about 10 minutes. So the installation process is as follows. So we just have a flow chart here that is showing us what you can do. You need to prepare, then you need to install the operating system. As we've said, it can be Windows or SUSE Linux. Then you need to install the database. You also need to, after installing the database, you can now install eSight. And you, after installing eSight in your server, you also need to install an antivirus software. We also have optional procedures here, like performing security hardening and importing CA certificates. So after doing that, you can now start the eSight service, and you can log in to eSight and perform several procedures. So really, that is the flowchart for doing this. Now, Huawei provides two eSight installation schemes. So one of them is pre-installation scheme, and the other one is what you call the brand new installation scheme. So pre-installation scheme, the operating system and eSight system have been pre-installed on the eSight server, delivered to the site. So they deliver an eSight server with the operating system and eSight already installed. So just like when you purchase your phone, we have pre-installed applications like the Google Apps. So that is what we call the pre-installation scheme. Then you have the brand new installation scheme. So if a self-purchased server is used or the eSight system needs to be reinstalled, then you're going to perform a brand new installation. So for the brand new installation now, this is the process. Whatever you're seeing here on the flowchart. Now, when it comes to installing the antivirus software, they have a recommended antivirus, which is called Trend Micro Office Scan. So that's the one that they recommend to use for eSight. It can be purchased from the Office Scan website. So that's the one that is recommended. It's not a Huawei antivirus. For a certificate, you can also use a self-signed certificate. Other than using a CA certificate, you can also use a self-signed certificate. But as you know, a CA certificate is more trusted. Okay, so that is it. So the software and hardware environment. So depending on the number of nodes that you want to manage, we're going to have minimum server hardware requirement. So for example, if you just have less than 200 devices that you want to manage, you can use a server that has a memory of 4 GB and a minimum hard disk space of 40 GB. On the other hand, if you're having about 20,000 nodes to manage, you need a minimum of 32 GB memory and a minimum of 320 GB hard disk. Then also for the CPU, is it a quad-core CPU, 2 gigahertz or above? At least four quad-core CPUs. So you see, with the minimum here, you just need a single CPU. It should be at least dual-core, and 2 gigahertz and above. Okay, so on the operating system and the database, as we said, you can either use Windows Server. You can use Windows Server, for example, Windows Server 208, or you can use what we call the novel SUSE Linux. Now, when you're using the Windows Server, for the database, you can use MySQL or you can use the Microsoft SQL Server. So you can use either of those. When your operating system is SUSE Linux, then you can use Oracle database. Oracle database. Configuration 2 is recommended where there are 20,000 managed nodes. So it is recommended that you use the SUSE Linux and the Oracle database. So for accessing your eSight, you need a browser. So you can use any of those browsers. Recommended resolution and recommended memory for your machine as a network admin are there. Okay. So the installation plan. So before installing eSight, ensure that the IP address, host name, and password are correctly configured so that they can install eSight correctly and quickly. So this is the IP address of your server. One thing that I need to emphasize is that the IP address of your eSight server must be a static IP address. You must configure a static IP address. Most likely you'll get that question in the exam. So you need to configure a host name and an IP address, a username, and a password. Now the eSight initial username and password are admin, and the password is change me 123. Now the other important thing here is on the hard disk partition. You must have 2 hard disk partitions. So create one partition, for example, drive C, and the purpose for that partition is for installing the operating system. Then create another partition, for example, drive D, and the purpose of that partition should be to install the database and eSight system. So you see the installation path for eSight is going to be on drive D. Then it's going to create a folder called eSight. It's also important. So when eSight is delivered to the site, change the time zone and time based on the site environment. So it's important so that when you are getting notifications, you can get the correct time when some of those parameters you're monitoring actually occurred. So you can obtain a software in one of 2 ways. You can have a CD. You can have a CD, or you can obtain the software package from the internet. So this is the particular link that you can use to obtain the software by going to choose support network management eSight. Then you're going to get several versions of eSight. So you can choose one that you want to use. So the next thing is on installing the database. So let's begin with Windows. When your operating system is Windows Server, you can either use the MySQL database or the SQL 2008 database. Now, MySQL database automatically comes with the eSight software. So if you want to use MySQL database, you do not need to install the MySQL database separately. But when you want to use the SQL Server database, you must manually install it before you install eSight. So before installing eSight, you have to install the database. But if you want to use MySQL database, you can just install eSight and it will also install the database. Okay. So of course, we double click a file called setup.bat to start the installation process. Then you select a language to determine the language of the installation GUI and the operation GUI. So after clicking on that, you can now click on install. So you have to specify the server IP address. The server IP address. So specify the default IP address of the current server. If the server has multiple addresses, then in the drop-down list, you can select a routable IP address. You see here we have a drop-down. So that is where you specify the IP address of the server. The other thing is the server port. It uses the HTTP port 8080. Port 8080. So you also need to specify that. Then the installation directory, as we've said, you should always create a partition, drive D, on your server so that you install the database and eSight there. So you can specify the installation directory like that. After that, you can configure the database parameters. So for example, here we are using MySQL. So you see, if you click on this drop-down arrow, you can be able to, if you click on this drop-down arrow, you can be able to see the other alternatives, the other alternatives. So for now, we're just going with MySQL. The other thing you can configure is a database, the username and the password for the database. So you can also change that. You can also change that. Okay. So you also have a list of components that you can choose from. That is, what do you want to install? Because you might not, for example, need some of these applications. So, for example, if you don't want, for example, to install wireless LAN management, then you can uncheck. You can uncheck this checkbox here. So by default, all the basic functional components are mandatory and cannot be unchecked. So they cannot be unchecked. So the default ones cannot be unchecked. Okay. So that is how you're going to see it as it installs. Then once you're done, you need to click on that checkbox to start the eSight server and then click on finish. So once you're done, you now need to start the eSight service. How to start the eSight service is on the desktop, you double click on the eSight icon. So the eSight icon will look something like this, eSight console. So once you double click on that, it will open eSight. So other than that, you can also open it through the start menu on Windows operating system by going to the eSight folder, then you click on eSight console here. So those are the two methods which you can use to open eSight. So login. If you want to log into eSight from your network management system, so you need to open your browser. For example, Explorer 9. Then you enter HTTP, then the IP address, then the port number. Then you press enter. And when you do that for the first time, most likely you're going to get this error. especially if you used a self-signed certificate during the installation process. So there's a problem with this website security certificate. So don't worry about that. Just go on and click continue. Continue to this website because you trust it. So the browser is going to ask you, so that next time it doesn't tell you that it's untrusted, it can ask you to install, for example. You can install that self-signed certificate in your browser so that it's trusted going forward. So to do that, you click somewhere here. Then it's going to ask you to view the certificate. You click view certificate. Then you click install certificate. And then you click OK, so that you don't get that error again. Okay, so after that, you need to log in by providing the default username and password. The default username is admin. The default password is changeme123. When you do that, the eSight will prompt you to change your password. eSight will prompt you to change your password. Something important to note here is that if you forget your password, if you lose your password, there is no way of recovering the password. You'll have to reinstall eSight in order to restore the default password. So be very careful when changing the password, and if possible, save it somewhere else. So once you're done, this is the window that you're gonna get. So let's look at the different parts. Number one here is really the address bar of your browser. Number two here is the top menu, the main menu. Number three here is where you get the statistics for the different parameters that you're monitoring. And so for example, we are getting the CPU usage for this switch. It's at 35%. At number four here, what do we have? Or common information and buttons. At number five here, we have the alarm indicators. Then as we said, you can customize this window. So eSight is customizable. So you can be able to add other other parts and make it the way you want it to look. Okay. So you need a license. You need a license to be able to run eSight on your server. Now, generally, a license file is an authorization file generated by a dedicated encryption tool based on the contract. This is supposed to be contract signed by the customer and the Huawei. So, and the information about the server where eSight is installed. So after obtaining the license file, customers need to load it to eSight and activate the permission to use eSight. However, customers can use eSight for 90 days without a license. But after the trial period expires, now the page for updating the license is displayed when you try to log in to eSight, and therefore logging is going to fail. Again, during the trial period, eSight can only manage a maximum of 60 network equipment. And also a fewer number of some of the advanced features, like MPLS VPN. You can only monitor a maximum of 10. IPsec VPN, maximum of 10. So how do you apply for How do you apply for a license? You follow these 3 steps. You obtain the contact information. The contact information can be from Huawei or a partner, a Huawei partner. Then you're also supposed to obtain the server equipment serial number, what is normally referred to as ESN. ESN. So this is used to uniquely identify the device. So it is used to ensure that the license is granted to the specified device. That means that if you want to reinstall eSight to a new server, you'll need a new license. So that's one thing you should know. Then after that, so after you've obtained the contact information on who's gonna give you that, then you get the ESN, then now you apply for the license from this particular link. So that's how that is done. So in obtaining the contract information, you need the contract number, the product name, and the product model. So those are some of the details that you need, and also an activation password. So you'll get a document that looks almost like this. So how do you obtain the ESN from eSight, the ESN of your server? You can go to where? Let me see. You can go here. You click on System, then you click on from the top menu, then you click on License Management. So after you click on License Management, the next tab there is Obtain ESN. So when you click Obtain ESN, actually what happens, the ESN is generated from your MAC address, from the MAC address of your device. So if your device has several network interface cards, you can click this drop down so that you choose a particular MAC address. Now, the ESN is actually an encrypted. So this is now your ESN. It's an encrypted version of your device MAC address. So this is what you're going to use as your ENSN, encrypted version of your MAC address. So that is how you obtain your ESN, equipment serial number. So how to activate the license? You click on choose license activation, then password activation from the main menu. Then you enter the activation code. So the activation code will be in the product information document. So that is where you enter. This is where you enter that particular code. This is where you enter the ESN, the ESN of the server. Then you confirm the activation and download the license on step 3 there. So after you've downloaded the license from the Huawei website, you can now import it. You can now import it by going to the main menu, then clicking System, then License Management, then you click on the first tab here, License, Import License. So it's going to tell you to upload a file. So you simply upload the file, and then you click Apply, like that. So that's how that is done. I already showed you how to obtain the ESN, the particular ESN. Okay, so if you want to uninstall eSight, it's easy. You can click on the Start button. If you're using the Windows Server, then you click on Uninstall. So you need to begin. The first step should be to stop eSight. So you stop it first, and then you go to Uninstall. So that's how you uninstall eSight. So are you sure you want to restart the operating system? You simply click yes, finish, and then yes. Now we have what we call the eSight deployment modes. Generally, we have 3 deployment modes. What we call the single node server mode. We also have the hierarchical deployment mode, and we also have what we call the integration with the OSS, the Operation Support System. So let's understand each one of them. So with the single node, the eSight app base works in a browser server mode and allows simultaneous access by multiple web browsers. So you have your eSight server here, you have your network management systems. In your server, of course, you have the database and the eSight application running. So several browsers can log into eSight. If you're working, for example, as a team of network engineers, so several can monitor. So you have a single node, just a single eSight server. That's why it's called single node server mode. Then you have the hierarchical deployment mode. So eSight also supports hierarchical management to allow an enterprise headquarters to monitor, networks in the branches. So in the hierarchical deployment mode, the upper layer network management system can add lower layer network management systems, and it can provide links to lower layer NMSs. So when you click such a link, a new browser window is displayed where you can log in to a lower layer NMS. So you see, we have branches and we have the headquarters here. So you have an eSight server at the headquarters, which is running the professional version and is able to monitor the entire organization network. On another branch, you have another server. So this is what we are calling a lower layer network management system. And on the particular branch, for example, you have the team there running a standard version because they're just managing a single branch. So that is what we call the hierarchical deployment. And the last mode is what we call the integration with the OSS. So let's first of all understand what an OSS is. So eSight can integrate with the upper layer operations support system and report network alarms through SNMP to interconnect to OSS. So the integration with the OSS has the following advantages. It improves network management capability through the OSS systems. It also isolates the network equipment management from network management, and it meets requirements of the enterprise operation and maintenance mechanism. So the OSS is simply another monitoring server whose main purpose is network equipment management. So that is the integration with the OSS. So they can work hand in hand. Actually, I'm forgetting I'm forgetting about the OSS, the Operation Support System. Oh, okay. As the name suggests, OSS does not manage equipment, but it actually does network management, the operations on the network. So then eSight can manage the equipment. So you can use both of them. Commonly used, especially in data centers, where you have to create virtual machines for different users and so on and so forth. So that is what an OSS does actually, Operation Support System. So you can also integrate eSight so that they work together with the operations and support system. Okay. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. That's the end of this topic. I volunteer to take up the first question, please. If you have a question, you can also throw it in round.
Number one is true, yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Number two?
Number two, the answer is 90 days.
Yes, number two, the answer is 90 days. So I think someone asked, are we to install this in our devices? Not really. But if you have a different device which you're not using, it is something you can play around with. So just install either Windows Server or SUSE Linux, which is available for free on the internet. Then install the trial version of eSight, just to have a feel of how that process goes. Any other question? Okay, thank you very much. Asanteni sana.